Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Andrew Ginter, the VP of Industrial Security at Waterfall Security Solutions.
I'm Greg Hale. I'm the editor and founder of Industrial Safety and Security Source, and ICS STRIVE.
And it's ICS STRIVE we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the new OT incident repository that Greg has developed. And we're going to be talking about a new report that Greg and I have cooperated on in terms of looking at what's in the repository, what happened in 2021, what lessons can we learn. Go ahead.
We launched ICS STRIVE about a year ago in March. And when I started ISS Source, I was always looking for ways to find out more and more information, incidents, and see if I can relate one incident that happened to another incident. And back then, this is about 12 years ago, there was the RISI database, and ICS CERT did some stuff, but they all kind of went by the wayside. So I want to say about a year and a half ago or so, I sat down with some of my cybersecurity friends, and we were going over some thoughts and ideas, and we came up with this ICS STRIVE. And it's essentially, it's a repository of incidents that have happened. And these incidents, you can search them for, the name of the company, let's see what else, the date the incident happened, the type of malware, the threat actor, and
consequences,
thank you. And it's essentially, then they're all kind of cross-collated. So if you want to look up one thing, you can find out things that happened in one industry or types of attacks that one threat actor did across the board.
That's right. And when I found out about the repository, what struck me, what excited me about it is sustainability. Because we've had RISI come and go, we've had 3 or 4 other repositories, less well known, come and go. And in my estimation, they always go because they're extra work, because they're managed by security people who are doing security, and they need to understand what's happening in the attack world, because you need to understand attacks in order to design defenses, so they need the knowledge. But they don't necessarily need each and every attack in order to get sort of a gestalt of what's happening in the world. And so becoming comprehensive is always sort of extra work. It was hard to find a justification, a cost justification to do that work. But Greg is a journalist, among other things. He's got a long background in the engineering world, but he's a journalist. And so it's his job to do the research on every incident and write articles about every incident. And as long as he's doing the work, he figured, let's put it in a database and make it available to everyone. And so that is, in a sense, a perfect fit with Greg's business model. So, I'm excited because this is a repository that I think is going to stand the test of time.
And that is the goal. We definitely want it to last more than a year, 2 years, 3 years. We want it to keep going on for a long time.
So we're also going to be talking about a report. This is a report that's not quite done. We wanted to have it ready for today, and we didn't. Realistically, it's likely to hit the streets in about 2 weeks, so it's in the very final stages of being finished. You folks are getting a preview of it here. The report is not about every incident in the database. We've selected incidents, a couple of criteria. One of my most important criteria was select incidents that I have experience with in terms of the industry, the priorities, the circumstances. I don't know squat about hospitals yet. I hope someday to learn, but so we didn't write about incidents in hospitals. What we focused on was incidents with physical consequences, not got into the network and stole some data and disappeared, but the manufacturing process continued, the light stayed on. These are incidents with physical consequences in discrete manufacturing, so everything from toasters to automobiles to aircraft, and process industries, everything from power to oil and gas to rails to transportation. So that was the focus, and to me the goal. What do you use the report for? Well, partly it's, again, everybody in the security industry needs to become familiar with what's happening in the world, because sooner or later that's going to come after us. So that's sort of the usual reason. But another reason is, these are real incidents with real consequences. And to me, that's a powerful tool to take to our business decision makers who have to authorize funding for initiatives like this. And historically, getting warnings from the government, do we believe the government? A lot of people don't. Getting alerts about vulnerabilities, is anyone exploiting them? I don't know. But here are other businesses in similar industries or the same industry that suffered real consequences. This is a powerful tool in my mind for springing funding loose.
In the report, we're writing about 22 actual incidents that had some kind of physical consequences. But throughout the year, from last year, we reported on 64 incidents that happened throughout the industry. And so, but we're really focusing on the 22, as Andrew's saying. But we also know that this is a snapshot of the types of incidents that are happening. We know that this is just the tip of the iceberg and a lot more out there, but this is a good indicator of what's going on. Another thing that I want to add is a lot of times I've seen in past databases, they put the incident in and that's it. What we're constantly kind of doing is learning more and more about that incident and refreshing it. So it's what we know that's happening in April, we'll add to it in May or June or September or October, that kind of thing. So we're constantly updating them.
So here's a preview of the incidents that occurred in 2021 that had physical consequences. Most of the consequences were shutdowns of physical operations, of manufacturing or other physical operations. And for the record, we selected for here only incidents that had public reports where the knowledge was public. No private disclosures. Something happened, but we're not telling you anything. These are, you can go to Bloomberg, you can go to ISS Source and read about the details and names and numbers of these incidents. Some of them are not surprising. Everyone's heard of Colonial. You may or may not have heard of JBS Meatpacking. 4 or 5 of the world's biggest meatpacking plants were shut down for I think between 24 and 48 hours. We're talking 1 million cattle a day going. I take it back. It's a year. It's a year going through these. So, a few tens of thousands of animals, not processed the way they were supposed to be. All of them, 21 of the 22, all of them except one, was ransomware. The exception is Iranian Rails on the bottom there. That was a hacktivist or a hacktivist group who got in and disrupted signage and caused, in the words of the official newspaper, unprecedented chaos at passenger rail stations throughout Iran. A report which was subsequently redacted, saying there was no consequence at all. So you believe what you wish.
One of the things I find interesting about it is the incident on New Cooperative. And the reason why I found that interesting is it happened in September after the harvest, after all the grain has come in Iowa. And it really hit me that this was, you hear about ransomware attacks and sometimes they're drive-bys, they just throw something up against the wall and see what sticks. But this was a focused attack that went after this grain facility. And it just hit me that this is kind of like the new wave of attacks that seem to be happening. I might be right, I might be wrong, but it's that attack I found to be the most interesting. Now, what was great about it is New Cooperative didn't cave in and they went out on their own. At least rumor has it they went out on their own and they didn't pay any ransom on it. But I just found that to be one of the more interesting of the 22 incidents that we wrote about.
I was raised on a farm. The organization was targeted in the middle of harvest season for several grains, and grain receipts, handling received grain was impaired for a large part of a day.
And if you look at it from the ransomware attack perspective, it's a brilliant attack. I mean, it's a perishable good. So go after them, hit them. They should pay, and you would think they would pay. Now, kudos to New Cooperative, and they didn't, but I just found that, like I said, that's very interesting.
Industries, Not a lot of surprises here. There were very few incidents there were none in electric. There was one in oil and gas. Both oil and gas and electric have reputations, certainly in North America and to an extent worldwide, as being heavily defended. And so that, in a sense, was not a surprise. To me, that what might seem a bit of a surprise is rails, because the rail engineering culture is extremely safety focused. There's safety is king in rails, and in a sense, it's surprising that you would have outages due to cybersecurity. But if you look more closely at the incidents, you'll see that most of them affected IT networks. Most of them affected the ticketing systems. And without the ability to issue tickets, the passenger rail systems had to stop. So that was sort of we're not talking about ransomware getting into the signaling system. We were talking about the IT networks.
The surprise I found out of this, and we're saying there were no real surprises, the surprise I found out that I felt was the Colonial Pipeline attack. And maybe it's me being naive, I don't know, but the relative ease in which the attackers got in, and then what ensued after that, I found that I was surprised by that, because this, as was pointed out to me yesterday, and I had forgotten about this. This wasn't the first time that Colonial shut down their pipeline, but the panic that happened after the Colonial shutdown, I found that compelling, versus the other time, which was right after Hurricane Harvey. The Colonial pipeline was shut down for, I don't know how many, 3, 4, 5 days, whatever period of time was. But the reaction from that wasn't obviously as great as the reaction that happened when it shut down this past May. And I just found that that was a surprise to me.
So the report is focused on those incidents and the lessons we draw from them, but we do mention the other stuff that we've observed in the repository. There were 8 near misses. So everyone's heard about Oldsmar. Oldsmar did not suffer physical consequences. Yes, the lie setting was set up to 10,000 times what it was supposed to be, but there's a large body of finished water that lie goes into, and so there was in fact no damage done to the finished water. The pH wound up slightly different than it should be because the incident was caught so quickly. So there's a bunch of those. The one that caught my eye was Fujifilm. They produce COVID tests. Their IT order processing was shut down by a ransomware attack, but there were no delays in shipments of COVID tests reported. So to me, that's a near miss. If their ability to take orders had been impaired longer, it may be that they would have produced the COVID tests and had no way to get them to customers. So there were some near misses. There were some incidents in other industries. The casinos shut down because they were worried about leaking customer data into the world. It was an IT breach, but it was a physical shutdown because of an IT breach. 7 school systems. Many schools had to shut down for periods of between a day or 4 or 5 days, sometimes because of air conditioning, sometimes because of again, crippled IT systems, but physical consequences. 10 healthcare organizations, over 17 hospitals had impaired operations. Most of them had to divert ambulances to other hospitals because their, again, information systems had been compromised. And in retail, we saw gas stations throughout Iran shut down because of an attack. We saw about 500 Swedish grocery stores shut down. To me, I don't know if that's really process industries. We left them out of this report, but to me, it's arguable.
I found, going back to the Oldsmar incident, doing and searching and looking at the water industry attacks, there were 4 that occurred last year. It was Oldsmar, and there were 2 in Maine, and there was 1 in California. And it just makes me look and think about, the water industry. And we wrote about it extensively during Oldsmar and how vulnerable it is. And I know the federal government's gotten involved, and they're trying to help out to make sure these water areas, water plants they get their they get the right security levels. But I just found with the importance of what water is to the public, and their security is kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, the weakest out there. I just found it compelling. And if you want to talk about a reaction, we did a story years ago about in Charleston, West Virginia, about a chemical spill in the river up there that forced the town, or forced Charleston to go without water out of the. They had to get bottled water shipped in for like a week or something like that, and it was. That's the importance of the water industry. So when, if the lie went into that system, would it have done anything? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm amazed at the whole water industry situation.
Trends. Most of the victims were in food and beverage. Not industries and discrete manufacturing. Neither industry is known for strong security. There's exceptions in every industry. I mean, Airbus, for example, is an exception in discrete manufacturing, but a lot of the small manufacturers, not so much. We saw this slide already. What's going on? There we go. Here's the trend slide. Okay, sorry. More than doubling the number of ransomware attacks last year, more than doubling total attacks with physical consequences. We're talking more than doubling ransomware attacks with physical consequences. We're predicting that we're going to more than double again next year. We're predicting exponential growth in this space, just like we've seen in lots of other spaces in the cyber world. Cloud-seeded ransomware. We're predicting that more attacks like Kaseya are going to hit the industrial space. Kaseya was ransomware that used an exploit in a software update distribution service to send the ransomware simultaneously into over 1,000 victims in the space of about 45 minutes. Not quite simultaneously. How many industrial vendors are there out there? There's hundreds. Okay, it's a very fragmented space. How many of them are huge? Few. Most of them are smallish. How many of them are offering software as a service or predictive maintenance as a service, or all of these services that rely on information feeds from the industrial equipment into the vendor's cloud? Most of them. This is a new business opportunity. It's a new kind of business. It's very profitable. All it takes is for the bad guys to get into 1 or 6 of those poorly defended vendors. There's going to be small, poorly defended vendors out there with connections into hundreds of sites, and use those connections to seed ransomware into hundreds of industrial sites simultaneously. This is the cloud-seeded ransomware. I'm predicting it's going to happen. We've seen it happen in the IT space. We're predicting it's going to happen in the OT space before the end of 2023. And the other thing we've observed is look at the ransomware attack techniques. They're using targeted attacks. When did they start doing that? Roughly 5-6 years after targeted attacks sort of came into common knowledge, with the DHS warning us about advanced persistent threats in 06, 07. You all remember that. Now we're seeing ransomware groups with Kaseya using cloud-seeded ransomware. The first time we saw that sort of big time in the nation-state space was NotPetya. A $1.3 billion lawsuit just finished with an insurance company about NotPetya. That was in 2017. What we see is that the tools and techniques that ransomware groups are using are trailing nation-state tools and techniques by between 3 and 5 years, which is bad news because we all think, oh, nation-state. No nation-state's going to come after us, but ransomware will. The good news is we have 3 to 5 years to take steps to get ready for ransomware to do to us whatever we see the nation states doing to each other today.
I'm also want to talk about the increase. We're already seeing to date that the level of attacks have increased over the same period of last year. So there is going to be an increase in attacks. Now, is it an increase in attacks, or is it an increase in reporting on attacks? And that's a question that could be up for debate. But no matter what, we're going to be looking at them and reporting on them as they keep growing and growing and growing. And one thing that Andrew and I have had our deepest discussion about on the trends was cloud-seeded ransomware. And I guess I was kind of calling it something different than you were. I was also saying supply chain attacks. And now whether we're the same or that's something that's completely different, that's a trend that's going to happen over the next year, and that's going to be an increase in supply chain attacks, the Kaseya, the SolarWinds, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we argue about the terminology, but the trends seem clear. It's just too big a financial opportunity for the ransomware folks. They're going to start sending their ransomware at us, through these supply chain or cloud pivoting routes. What do we do about it? We do have a few recommendations. I always recommend, if an industrial site wants to become, wants to jump to the head of the queue, this is what I documented in my most recent book, Secure Operations Technology. It is the methodology used by the world's most secure industrial sites. They ask different questions, so they get different answers. They look at security a different way. And they use all of conventional IT and OT security, don't get me wrong, but they do a bunch that's extra. And that's what I've documented in the book. If you're interested, there are free copies at the Waterfall Cabana in 15 minutes. Another strong recommendation is not just put, unidirectional gateways or some other strong separations, strong protection between your IT and OT networks. Don't just do that. Also, you have to look real hard at what's on your IT networks and figure out if minute by minute, OT industrial operations depend upon services on the IT network. If your ticketing system is essential to keeping the rails running, you shouldn't really think about it as an IT resource. You got to think about it as at least a hybrid resource, if not an OT resource. You got to start defending it to the same degree that you defend the minute by minute, I need these systems up to run resources. These dependencies are stuff that's killing us in a lot of spaces. And finally, the dependency that you want to control in a sense the most tightly is any dependency on a cloud service or an internet-based service. Because again, that's an opportunity to pivot an attack through poorly defended internet service providers into our most important assets.
The recommendation that that we went back and forth on, but it's to be a more, you come to these events and you listen to everybody saying, we got to do things differently, got to do things differently. Well, the answer is, yeah, we have to do things differently. Now, I don't have the pure answer, of course, nobody does, I don't think, but having a more holistic security environment where we're able to have the business enterprise, the manufacturing enterprise, the IT enterprise, the business or the building automation enterprise, the physical security enterprise, having that all kind of under one umbrella and then having everything kind of blend to one another, I think is more something that we would see happening in the future.
So a word about Waterfall. We are the OT security company. We invented the unidirectional security gateway. We've been around for going on, 14, 15 years this year. We're deployed across the globe. We have offices across the globe. We're trusted by all kinds of critical infrastructures, and we continue to expand our scope into new areas. Rails is comparatively new for us, but is growing very rapidly. Building automation is new territory, but an industry that urgently needs stronger security. That's what I had. Oh, come on.
ISS Source, we're a news website that's focused on safety and security, and we're talking about security. It's cyber and physical security. We also have a weekly newsletter called The Shield. If anybody wants to subscribe to it, just go on our website and you'll be able to subscribe to it. And then, of course, we have ICS STRIVE. And so between all those entities, we're trying to help everybody do their job better, or at least be more informed about what's happening throughout the industry and see if we can help.
So to wrap up, there's a new incident repository based on OT incidents that have been reported in public reports, not private disclosures, not errors and omissions, real cyber attacks. An incident repository that, I have reason to believe is going to survive into the future because it's finally got the right business model. There's a new report out. It's not quite out. It's going to be out within about 2 weeks. So stay on, have a look or subscribe to this man's newsletter, to Greg's newsletter, and you'll get notice of it. But it's coming, real soon. We wanted to have it done for Monday. And sort of the main lesson here is that ransomware is a pervasive threat, and ransomware threats are tracking nation-state attack techniques by about 3 to 5 years. So, whatever we see the nation-states doing to each other today, we've got to prepare for. And I would encourage you, by all means, come by the cabana and grab a copy of the book. And experts like yourself, let me know when you've read it, what you think of it. I'm working on the new one, and I need feedback from folks like you about this one as to whether it was useful to do a better job the next time.
One last thing, if you know of an incident, you can send me a note. You can go on the ICSSTRIVE.com website, and there's a button up on the upper right-hand page where you can send in an incident. Now, I'll vet it, I'll check it out and make sure it's real and all that kind of thing. So, we're not having all these fake incidents out there. But, this is for everybody. This is for the industry to learn from and to pick up from. But it's also, it's going to be me doing it, so I can use some help. So if anybody has something they want to offer, that's great. I would appreciate that.
Are there any questions? Do we have time for a question, if there is one? There's a question at the back. Yes, sir.
So in your investigation, if someone puts in that would help, sorry. If someone puts in the indicators of compromise for Cobalt Strike, that it eliminates about 90% of the ransomware attacks. Have you run into that with any of your research?
I have not. But
I have not. I mean, I don't investigate incidents. We're relying on public reports. I have seen that observation made in, analysis articles saying it looks like the bad guys have, either bought or stolen licenses. But in terms of what to do about it, I haven't seen any thoughts on that. Yes, sir.
For incidents that take several years to get enough meaningful information to have a good picture about it, how do you intend to address that within your?
Well, I want to keep updating. So I keep looking at them, and it's being an old newspaper guy. It's always you write about the news story, then you follow up and you follow up and you follow up, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, again, there's always reminders, or you can send me an email saying, well, what about that one incident that happened? There may be more information out there. Then I'm out there and I'm going to get it.
And then the same with your yearly reports. You'll address the previous years in that way.
Yeah.
Right. So let me interrupt there. That's actually a tricky one. It's one thing for Greg to say, I'm going to put it in the repository, but if you get a report in 2021 about an incident that happened 3 years earlier, and it was finally disclosed because someone discovered it in a security and exchange disclosure, someplace that it just wasn't noticed before. There was a public disclosure. It's great to say it's going into the database. Yes, indeed. The report is about 2021's incidents. This thing happened in 2017 or 2019.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
So short answer is we haven't crossed that bridge yet, but we're going to have to. And
yeah, I think the answer is if it was a significant enough incident and there was a big enough change or more knowledge learned, then I think we would have to touch on it. It wouldn't be the whole report wouldn't be written on it, but maybe there would be something about that, like having a history in there. But but there would have to be, it would have to be a pretty big incident. Now, if it was something, that was a little bit smaller, yeah, on the repository, we would update it. There was no doubt about it. But would we mention it in the report? I don't know. I mean,
But the other,
we have to go back and forth on.
that's right. But one of the takeaways in the report that we're working on going forward is a graphic saying, here's the findings. And it's a graphic that reporters can take and paste into their stories and say, here's the history of ransomware attacks with physical consequences. And that graphic is something we're going to update as the reports go by. If we see older reports, I think it's absolutely fair to go back and update the graphic retroactively, put a mention of it in the next report coming out, so that the graphic can be used A, by reporters, and B, by all of us when we need to spring funding loose. It is the latest. We do need to keep that up to date. You're right.
And unrelated, we have on the site, we have over 450 incidents that are on the site. Some are old incidents, and they may not have much info on it, but we have that many, at least 150. I think it's a little bit more than that.
So a quick one. So for the record, I'm from the Department of Defense, and I believe the government. Just want that on the record.
I'm good with that.
So how do we get the rest of the iceberg that you talk about, that you're only really seeing some of these incidents? What do you postulate might be some positive incentives to get more to publicly report to help, provide more data for your useful?
Well, Greg and I disagree a little bit on this. In my books, it's difficult to hide a production shutdown. If you've had to lay your people off, I mean, how did we find out about the JBS shutdown? It wasn't because JBS told us. It was because the union called the press and said, hey, we've just been laid off. Something's going on. And it came to light that way. So it's difficult to hide major shutdowns. I mean, something minor, if 3 people get laid off or they still get paid for 3 days, there's just no production. The little stuff you can miss. The big stuff, I don't think you can miss.
So it's a matter of attribution of cyber attacks to shutdowns. They may have another reason.
That's a good point. So for anyone who didn't hear, he's saying there may have been a report of a shutdown, but there may not be a reliable cyber attribution to the shutdown from an authority that knows. So yeah, it is. So
my answer is there has to be more transparency, and there can't be for people reporting an incident. There can't be consequences from, and I'm gonna say the government. I don't mean to rip them apart, but there can't be any consequences other than what they're feeling from the attack. Now, if it's them being malicious on their part, then yeah, they should pay some consequences. But it has to be more transparent, and people have to be free to be able to talk about it. And if that's not going to happen, it's going to be a secret.
yeah.
Nobody's going to want to talk about it. And, I'll go through 10 Qs when people are, reporting, public companies are reporting, just to see if, and I don't go through a boatload of them because I, only so many hours in a day, but I'll look and see if there were any kind of incidents. And, you can find them and they don't talk about it, but they're in there someplace sometimes. But that's painstaking.
Well, there's been some talk of that your share price should increase when you show you've used all the resources to have better than average security, and then even if you're still had an incident, you reported it in a certain amount of time, then that could be an evaluating factor that bolsters your share price rather than you hide it and don't. So.
Yeah, I mean, the classic example is, you have 2 reports, SEC, or let's just say to the board. You've got one CISO talking to the board. The CISO says, board says, did we have any cyber incidents last year? And the answer was nope, we're clean, nothing, absolutely nothing. The second CISO says there were 8 near misses. There was 1 incident. It was subtle. We found it. We caught them before they did any damage. But in the end, there was no shutdowns. Which CISO is more credible? So yeah, I think that if that, there should be, a reward for credibility in your reports. And, to your point about the government, I would hope that this report and this kind of evidence only provides, in a sense, reinforcement for the predictions the government's been making all along.
Can we one more? No? All right, we'll catch you afterward.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.